Welcome to English Story Hub. Learn English through fun stories. Improve vocabulary, listening, and speaking skills. Like, subscribe, and keep learning with us. Mysteries of the Unexplained. Part 2. But sea monsters aren't only in films and books. People have discovered real monsters in the seas and oceans. These are often more frightening than a monster from a story. Giant squid. The idea of a giant squid is very frightening, but people have seen them. A US military ship was sailing near Newfoundland, Canada, when suddenly a very large whale jumped out of the water. It was fighting with a giant squid. The whale looked about 18 meters long, but the squid was trying to kill it with its long arms. The squid was as big as the whale. The men on the ship were very frightened. They didn't want to get close enough to take photographs. These giant squid are true monsters. It still isn't understood why they grow so large. The globster. This is probably the most unusual monster. In November 1922, people on a beach in South Africa watched two whales fighting with the sea monster. The fight continued for hours. The monster sometimes jumped 6 meters out of the water and hit the whales with its tail. The whales won the fight and swam away. The dead monster was then pushed onto the beach by the water. People couldn't believe what they saw. It was a very large, shapeless thing, with a long neck and no head. It was 14 meters long, 3 meters wide and 1.5 meters high. No expert could name the animal. Many people, often fishermen, have reported seeing these large, ugly monsters. Monsters that walk the earth. There are monsters in mountains and wild areas. Many people have seen monsters in China, Nepal, Russia, North America, and other places that are half man and half animal. No one has ever caught one. Here are the two most famous of these monsters. The Yeti. Yeti have walked in the Himalayan mountains of Nepal and China for hundreds of years. Reports from climbers in the Himalayan mountains have described them as very tall, nearly 3 meters. A Yeti stands like a man and has hair all over its body. It is dangerous and can attack people. Most people have seen signs of the Yeti in the snow. These have the shape of a man's foot but are very large. They can't be the feet of an animal. The most famous report came from Don Willens, a British climber, in 1970. In the mountains of Nepal, he watched a Yeti playing in the snow by the light of the moon for about 20 minutes. The next morning, he saw large footprints in the snow. They were 35 centimeters long and 18 centimeters wide. Bigfoot. Bigfoot is the American Yeti. The Native Americans first saw the monster and named it Sasquatch. Reports of Bigfoot have continued since the early 1900s. Descriptions are similar to descriptions of the Yeti. The most frightening story came from Albert Ostman, a Canadian, in 1924. A large, strange-looking animal picked him up and carried him for 3 hours. We are learning about new mysteries every day. There are reports of alien activity, strange new monsters, unexplained stories in medicine, strange activity in space. It seems that the number of mysteries is growing. Or are we just more interested? Examples of mysteries come from the early days of our life on Earth. How did they do it? Stonehenge. Stonehenge, in the UK, is different from anything of its kind in Europe. After 5,000 years, it is still standing. But why was it built? Was Stonehenge used like a giant computer to make predictions from the position of the sun, moon, and stars? This is the most popular opinion. How was it built? Many of the heavy stones were brought from 240 kilometers away, so 1,500 men had to work every day for over 5 years, in one expert's opinion. The very large top stones fit into the smaller standing stones. This needed tools and skills that people didn't have at that time. Experts agree that a higher intelligence was needed. So who built Stonehenge? No one knows. For this reason, it is still one of the world's most interesting mysteries. The Easter Island statues. The island of Rapa Nui, in the Pacific Ocean, was named Easter Island when it was discovered by Europeans on Easter Day in 1722. It is famous for over 800 stone statues, called moai. The statues are between 1 and 10 meters tall and have similar faces. They stand by the sea, facing the land. Why did the people of Easter Island build them? Some experts think that the statues were the homes of ghosts of people from the island's past. The ghosts looked through the statues' eyes and guarded the island. People built the statues and then moved them to another part of the island and put them on platforms. In the early 1990s, 40 scientists moved 15 of the statues and put them on new platforms. They used modern equipment and worked every day, but it took them 4 years. So how did the people of Easter Island move more than 300 statues? Scientists have found no answers. Mysteries of Egypt. The pyramids. The 3 most famous Egyptian pyramids are in Giza. They were built for the bodies of the pharaohs after they died almost 5,000 years ago. The pharaoh's gold was put with them for the next life. The Great Pyramid is the largest. It is 140 meters high and 228 meters wide at its widest point. King Khufu's body is there. People think that the pyramid shape helped the pharaohs climb to the sky after their death. So how were the pyramids built? That is still not known. Scientists think that over 100,000 men worked for more than 20 years to build the Great Pyramid. More than 2 million stones were used. The stones were very large and very heavy. How were they lifted to the top? The Great Sphinx. The Sphinx guards the pyramids. It is 20 meters high and more than 73 meters long. The face is 4 meters high, and each eye is nearly 2 meters long. The Sphinx has the head of King Khufu's son, King Khafre. The body of an animal shows how strong the king was. Experts still can't explain how it was built. King Tutankhamun. The Valley of the Kings is near the city of Luxor, in Egypt. The bodies of the most famous pharaohs were put in special rooms there. An Englishman, Howard Carter, searched for years for the place where King Tutankhamun's body was kept. In 1923, he found a large room filled with gold and other beautiful things. He took many things away. But Carter and his team paid a terrible price for their discovery. A sign at the entrance promised death to the people who opened it. Carter didn't believe this. But before the year ended, 12 of the 20 scientists from his team were dead. Lost civilizations. The Greek writer Plato told a story about an island in the Atlantic Ocean called Atlantis. It was a beautiful place. The people were intelligent and had many interests. The land was rich with plant and animal life. The people used their skills well, so the island was a center for farming and business. Their buildings were beautiful and well built. Their kings and queens had great power in Europe and Africa. This was more than 11,000 years ago. And then the city disappeared under the sea. Was there really an Atlantis? If there was, why did it disappear? Some experts agree on one idea. Perhaps the story of Atlantis is really the story of the Greek island Santorini. People still want to know about Atlantis. They are still looking for this lost civilization. There have also been reports about the ancient civilization of Mu, near Japan. There are photographs of this mystery city under the sea. People believe they have seen buildings, statues, and roads. The Nazca Lions. In Peru, very large drawings of animals and 1,300 kilometers of straight lines cover more than 500 square kilometers of land. These were made by the Nazca people thousands of years ago. Scientists have traveled to Peru to study these shapes and lines. Many of the animal shapes are as big as 2 football fields. You can't see them from the ground because they are so large. So scientists have to take photographs from the air. There are many questions about the Nazca lions. Why are they so large? How could the Nazca people make perfect shapes like these when they couldn't see them from the ground? Who or what were they made for? Perhaps they were used to predict the weather and the best time for planting crops. Some people think the lines have a religious meaning. The power of the mind. Uri Geller became famous in the 1970s. He used the power of his mind to change the shape of metal things like spoons, forks, and keys. He has shown his very unusual skills many times. He can see when his eyes are covered. He can describe a picture or read a letter. He has stopped clocks working. Geller discovered his powers when he was only 4 years old. Scientists still can't explain how he does these things. Not everyone believes in his powers. But no one has proved that they aren't real. Nostradamus. Would you like to see into the future? Do you know anyone who has this power? The earliest known person with this power was Michel Nostradamus, 1503 to 66. He had great skill as a doctor, and he was very brave. When the Black Death killed thousands of people in France in the 1500s, he saved many people. But he couldn't save his wife and children from this terrible illness. When they died, he left his home. He traveled around Europe and became interested in mysteries. Other people soon discovered his power to predict the future. He became very well known in Europe and wrote a famous book, Les Prophéties, of more than 1,000 predictions. These predictions were about times that were 500 years into the future. Nostradamus correctly predicted many important things: the power of Hitler in Germany, the Second World War, and the deaths of some important people. He wrote of President Kennedy, his death will be sudden and sad. Nostradamus even correctly predicted his own death. He described exactly how he would die. When something important happens in the world, experts still read his predictions. Other people with this power have become famous since Nostradamus' time. But Nostradamus' work still interests people after 500 years. Dreams of the future. Some people have a strange feeling, often a dream, that something usually bad is going to happen in the future. They can't explain the feeling, but they are very sure. Many people have seen terrible things that have happened in the world. They have known about them before they happened. A girl had a dream about the end of the great ship Titanic on the night that it happened. She saw a large ship with many people on it. Suddenly, she heard a loud scream and one end of the ship went up into the air. The ship then disappeared quickly into the sea. Ocean travel was dangerous in those days, but how can we explain stories like hers? In 1979, David Booth had the same dream night after night. In his dream, he saw a plane crashing and burning near buildings. He told people about his dream, but he couldn't give them the time or place. The next day, a plane crashed at Chicago Airport and everyone on the plane was killed. The night before the attacks on New York in September 2001, a woman dreamt that she met a friend in New York. He was crying and pointing to two tall buildings. They were burning. The next morning, the attacks happened. John Snell lived in Poole, in England. On holiday, he paid a woman to look into his future. She told him, "You will die on your 45th birthday." He wasn't frightened because he didn't believe her. For 20 years, he worked long hours and enjoyed drinking. But as his 45th birthday came nearer, he started to worry. He stopped drinking. On his birthday, he refused to go out. The next day, he read a local newspaper report about the death of John Snell of Poole on his 45th birthday. The woman was right and wrong. There were two John Snells living in Poole. The other John Snell died. Body mysteries. Some of these stories show the power of the mind over the body. Others show frightening things that have happened to people's bodies. All are mysteries. Fire. How can a person suddenly start burning for no reason? There have been many terrible examples of this. The person is burnt to death very quickly, but nothing around them is burnt. Jacqueline Fitzsimon, a 17-year-old student, was walking down the college stairs with two friends when she suddenly started burning. 3 people tried to stop the fire, but it was too fast. She died in minutes. Firemen and police could find no reason for the fire or why it was so sudden. The Light Woman. In April 1934, a young woman from Parano in Italy began to have a very strange problem. When she was sleeping, a blue light came from her body. When she woke up, it disappeared. Her family called in scientists. The scientists watched her sleeping for a week, but they couldn't explain it. After 3 weeks, the blue light disappeared and never returned. Fire walking. We have heard stories for many years about religious men walking on fire. In 1935, this was tested for the first time. An Indian man, Kuda Bucks, walked over a fire. The fire's temperature was 300 degrees Celsius, but his feet weren't burnt and he felt no pain. Scientists watched and it was filmed. Scientists now agree that this is an example of the power of the mind over the body. In this photo, a fire walker in Sri Lanka walks calmly across hot stones. Up and away. Some people are able to lift themselves,